Did you know that Case and Huff and Schlieder has been servicing customers in the tri-state area for nearly 100 years? As an independent insurance agency, they have the flexibility to find the right value for your business, farm, and personal insurance needs. Case and Huff and Schlieder is a locally owned agency. Their agents and support team are ready to help. Give them a call or find them on Facebook. Case and Huff and Schlieder, proud sponsor of the Muddy River News Business Spotlight.
Welcome to the Case and Huff and Schlieder Business Spotlight. I'm Ron Kincher with Muddy River News. We have Brian Nippetson from TI Trust. And the first question I get from everybody is, what does the TI stand for, Brian?
It stands for True Integrity.
True Integrity.
True Integrity, yeah. So it's True Integrity Fiduciary Services is our tagline, so to speak, but the name of the company is TI-Trust Inc. We were once part of First Bankers. Our name used to be First Bankers Trust Services, and in 2019 they spun us off into a separate entity, and now we call it TI Trust, and we operate as a separate entity.
So is there any connection still with FBT, or are you guys completely independent of them?
Completely independent. So we're one of about 200 independent trust companies in the country. We have about $16 billion in assets that we manage for clients all over the country.
So how difficult was it, that process, to break away from First Bankers Trust in 2019?
Yeah, a lot went into it. A lot of it was behind the scenes. I think from the client standpoint, it was a non-event, or at least we were hoping it to be a non-event. And really leading up to that, Ron, for 15 years, we were First Bankers Trust Services. There was First Bankers Trust Company. Mm-hmm. We did trust work. They did bank and retail lending work. So we'd already had a lot of separation. There were a few shared services that we have, some IT and HR. When we spun off, we had a lot of that put in place already, and off we ran.
So when people think of trust services, first thing that pops in my mind is the trust that a person would have for their parents or for their grandkids, and things along those lines. You do that service, correct?
We do that, yes.
But you also do, the majority of your business is outside of that realm. Correct?
Yes, that's right. So the trust work that we do is we do a lot of employee benefit plans. That's kind of the bread and butter of what we do. So if you think of 401ks and profit sharings, we do a lot of that work. What we really do, our biggest piece, is something called employee stock ownership plans. Basically, the retirement plan owns stock in the company for which it is from the employer sponsor. Neiman Foods here locally is a employee-owned company. They have an ESOP, and so their employees get to be they have some ownership in the company.
So, how did you get involved with that aspect of the business? Starting, I'm assuming you started as a traditional trust organization, right?
Yeah. So go back all the way to 1956.
Right.
We had.
That's when you started, right?
That's when I started. A couple of gray hairs since then. Maybe a few years after that. 1956, we did the traditional trust work.
Right.
So, again, the personal trust, the wills and estates you typically think of. In the late 80s, there was a savings and loan crisis going on. And part of that, so if you remember the old, we had People Savings here, we had Gym City Savings,
right.
There were savings and loan companies. And the owners of those companies were the individual depositors. Well, that business had changed. And the government said you need to have a stock-based type of ownership. Well, my predecessor, Don Ganuzzi, had the bright idea of saying, hey, we've got these ESOPs, and they have an opportunity to be part of that ownership. So these former savings and loans went out to the public and said, hey, we'd like to have buyers buy into our company. And they also made an ESOP as part of that as their employees to do that. So we started that business in 1988. So we're coming up, on our 34th year actually next month.
So was it revolutionary, some of the stuff you were, it sounds like you're kind of forced into doing some things like that, but was at the time, did you have to kind of learn as you went?
In 1988, it was, we'd already, at that time we were already working on retirement plans. So we'd worked on defined benefit plans, think of a pension plan, we'd worked on those, and we did, 401ks. We're still pretty new back then in the late 80s, so we had worked in the retirement space, so this was something new. What I would say the commonality is, Ron, it's a trust. So the same principles that you would apply for an individual, for like your granddad's trust for your beneficiaries, is the same principles that you apply on an employee stock ownership plan. The employees are beneficiaries of that trust.
So how do you find, so, okay, when you mentioned the old savings and loan, the first thing that pops into my mind, It's a Wonderful Life, George Bailey. And I think that's what you're talking about when people running in there and he's got the crow running around. But so those banks are no longer, is what you're saying, right? And now they have to be employee owned. Or
They don't have to be, but certainly that was a mechanism for the old savings and loans to
Right.
convert to some stock-based type of ownership, was to have the employees be a part of that owner. What for us, what that trend, so there was a lot of the work that we did for those savings and loans in the late 80s and early 90s. Well, since that time, most of them have gone through that conversion.
Right.
And now we do all kinds of companies all over the country. So I use the term in the office, the fabric of GDP. If there's a company that's involved in the gross domestic product of the United States of America, they can have an ESOP, and we probably have been part of one. So some familiar names that you might have seen on a shelf. Fat Tire Beer or New Belgium Brewing was a client of ours. They got bought out a couple of years ago, but it was an employee stock ownership plan. Dansko Shoes is another one, a name you might be familiar with. In my household with 3 daughters and a wife, Eileen Fisher is an employee, part-owned employee stock ownership company.
But how do you, now, are you seeing a trend where more businesses are going that way?
Well,
going employee owned, and how do you find clients in that way?
Yeah, I think certainly in the last couple of years when we've a couple of things that are going on, I think socially that we talk about. So you hear things like ESG investing or diversity, equity, and inclusion. Those are things that come up quite often. And ESOPs can play a part of that, right? Because if you think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, the ESOP is equity and inclusion, right?
Right.
So the ESOP has certainly had a lot more interest by a lot of other businesses that haven't had that as part of their retirement plan. For us, the way we develop clients, it's a referral network.
Okay.
So we deal with attorneys and valuation experts and brokers and CPAs all across the country. So I think we've got clients in 42 or I think 43 states now, and represent about 100,000+ employee owners in those businesses.
So the different states creates different issues for you, I would assume, from a legal perspective, because you have to match the rules and regulations for what you offer to those states. Am I right?
Yeah, a little bit, because the employee stock ownership plan is a plan that falls under ERISA, which is a federal government.
Okay.
There was a legislation that was enacted in 1974 that federal law trumps. But having that said, there are certain states that we have to be a little bit more careful about when we go into that state, because again, they don't want us to compete with their businesses that they have, and we understand that. But but it's more at a federal level.
See, what I think people will be surprised about, and one of the reasons we wanted to have you on, is just how large your business has become here in town. You drive out to Cook's Lane, you see the building, you think maybe there's 20 people to work there. But since I've known you, I mean, you've gone from, I don't know how many, maybe a few employees to, what do you have now?
We've got 65 employees.
I mean, that's amazing to me. And you have another location downtown.
Yeah, right across the street.
Right across the street. So that the growth that you guys have experienced, it's got to be rewarding to you that you become such a big member of the community.
When I started.
Back in 56.
Back in 56 plus 39
30 years, yeah.
We had about $600 million in assets. And today we're just over 16 billion.
But what was the employee count back when you started?
I think there were 7 of us back
So now
then.
up to 60.
Now it's 65.
And you could use more, from what I understand.
Yeah, we could always use another hand or two.
Yeah,
That's right.
So I think that's the amazing part of your story. Is I think you're one of the better kept secrets in town is just that amount of growth and how you contributed to the economy, and not only that, but I know you have a strong community aspect to your organization. You try to get your employees involved in certain aspects around the area in a variety of different I hate to say charities, but a variety of different activities.
Yeah, we have a mission, vision, and value statement, and our value statement's a big part of what we do, and it's about people. So we encourage all 65 of our employees, and not all of them here in Quincy. We got some in
Right.
Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Atlanta, Georgia, St. Peters, Missouri, and up in Oak Brook, Illinois. But we encourage all of them to participate in their communities, and financially as a company, we help support them in that mission. So if there's a charity event that they're belonging to, again, every charity needs $1, and we're willing to put those dollars toward that.
That's the one thing I want to talk to you about is the locations that you have, because that's another thing I found interesting about your organization is it's a Quincy-based organization, but you got these little offices all over the country. You mentioned Philadelphia, but you've got one in Arizona too, right?
Got an office in Phoenix, Arizona.
Yeah.
Yes.
So how did that come about? Just luck? I mean, you found people want to retire and move to Arizona?
It's a much warmer place than Illinois than January. Phoenix, again, within our business, because we have a national business on the employee stock ownership plans that we work on, and now we have a national business on the personal trust accounts that we work on as well. We set up the office in those locations in Philadelphia and Chicago and Atlanta and Phoenix because it was a better access to our clients in those locations.
The one thing we haven't touched on too is your agribusiness, which how does that mix in with the TI portion of TI Trust?
Yeah. Certainly near and dear to my heart. So, as a farm kid, grew up, west of Payson. Today we manage about 30,000 acres in Illinois, Missouri, Iowa. We skip Indiana and we go into Ohio. And so we manage a number of different farms for individuals that they own the property, but they're not living on that farm. They may be a farm that they inherited from a grandparent. Don't want to sell the farm yet. Still has an opportunity, but they really don't know how to manage it either. So they'll hire us to be their farm manager. So that's one aspect that we do. The second part that we do is we do farmland real estate appraisal.
Oh, okay.
And when part of the spinoff in 2019, we did a lot of appraisals for a lot of different people, especially, as somebody passes away, they're trying to come up with a value. Now that we're an independent company in doing that, before we were affiliated with First Bankers, since then, because we're not affiliated with First Bankers anymore, I now get a lot more phone calls from a lot of other banks and saying, hey, can you help us do our appraisal? So,
oh, wow. Okay.
Business has been good on that end.
Well, thanks for coming by.
Thank you, Ron. It's good seeing you.
Brian Epperson with TI's Trust Services. I'm Ron Kincher. This has been the Business Spotlight, brought to you by Case & Huff & Schleter.
Did you know that Case & Huff & Schleter has been servicing customers in the tri-state area for nearly 100 years? As an independent insurance agency, they have the flexibility to find the right value for your business, farm, and personal insurance needs. Case & Huff & Schleter is a locally owned agency. Their agents and support team are ready to help. Give them a call or find them on Facebook. Case & Huff & Schleter, proud sponsor of the Muddy River News Business Spotlight.